Welcome back. On this episode, it's really part 2 of replacing the intake manifold and valve cover gaskets. And we'll throw an oil change in the mix. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Enthusiast Spec Accord. That is our 2003 Honda Accord Coupe V6 manual. And that's the important part, right? That manual. What a game changer. Anyway, really we are continuing from our last episode. We're going to go ahead and button everything back up after we replace the valve cover gaskets and the intake manifold gaskets. We're going to make sure there's no leaks going forward on this car, which is just where we want to be. On top of that, we're also going to throw in an air filter and give it an oil change. So some pretty standard maintenance items that have a pretty high payoff. So let's get in the garage and get some work done. Time to put our valve covers back in place. Of course, we clean them up a little bit, even though this is going in the rear and no one's ever probably going to see it this clearly. But hey, at least we put that effort in, right? So this one's a little bit of a squeeze. Make sure you orient it the right way. The way to see that it goes is these valve covers only have one valve cover bolt at the top of them, so towards the intake manifold. So that's a good way to do it. Now we are going to be squeezing under some stuff back here, so we'll try to clear the path, but the big thing is getting over those spark plug holes. So now what you want to do, now that you've got the valve cover in place, is ensure that your gasket is not sticking out, pinched, or somehow rolled out. So what I like to do is take a inspection mirror and check it out back there to make sure that gasket didn't slide out in the back. You want to see that nice little thing, or even fold it in. So looking good, looking good. All right, I'm happy with that. Time to secure it in with our newly done bolts. You guys remember how we put new gaskets and new brass fittings on these. So the short one goes up here, if I remember correctly. And this connecting of everything I save for the end. So I'll get the valve cover in place first and then we'll play that game. Remember that we still need to put all the coils back on. But let's right now try to get this valve cover tightened down. And before we run around connecting everything to the valve covers, let's go ahead and put the coil packs back on. We'll start with the rear since they're more challenging. Again, a 6mm Allen gets them in. With the coil packs installed, it's time to really start going over the whole engine, start figuring out how everything goes back together for the most part. You want to attach all the stuff that goes to the valve covers, because once we put the intake manifold in, it's really hard to access a lot of it. So at this time, let's go ahead and do that. It includes putting this back for the plug wires and everything else. So all those steps, all these vacuum lines, this might go to the intake manifold, but you know what I'm saying. Anything that goes to a valve cover, you want to go ahead and do at this time. With the valve covers back on and just about everything connected you need connected, at this time it's going to be intake manifold time, I guess. All right, so here's our gasket set that we're going to be using. So you have the metal gasket that goes underneath the intake manifold itself. You do have that top gasket that kind of holds that top plate on. That these do fail over time. It doesn't get regularly replaced, which is unfortunate because it will blow oil past these seals, so we're going to put that in. And as you can see, our new throttle body gasket when we put our throttle body back on the intake manifold. So let's go ahead. This first metal one's going to be where we start. Important thing here, if you plugged your intake runners here, going down into the engine, you want to go ahead and pull your towels or whatever you use to block that, because that's going to impede airflow a little bit. This is how she goes. So you want to, when you put this on, you want to make sure it goes exactly where it needs to go. You are going to have these guide kind of studs here to use. Boom, look at that. Where was the factory one? Let me show you. Now this one was leaking. It just gets flat and deformed over time. As you can see, the layers really are kind of stuck together and just, yeah, doesn't look that good. This new one, much nicer, nice and clean. That's how it goes, by the way. So, looking good. And now it's time to place our intake manifold. So you want to make sure anything you're connecting is kind of out of the way a little bit so you're not getting anything trapped underneath. Double check everything again to make sure everything's plugged in that you unplugged before. So you still have that accessibility, right? Just doing a general check, everything's good here. You're gonna have some loose vacuum hoses, some little brackets with things on them that you're gonna attach to the actual intake manifold, so those should still be loose. You do have a couple of little sensors that are gonna plug into various things. So everything looks good. I think we're ready to drop that intake manifold. So these are your two little guide studs here. You wanna make sure everything lines up with those. Your throttle body area should be pointing towards the driver's side of the vehicle. That's a good sign right there. Definitely a lot cleaner than when we took it out. And if you were smart, you put your hardware in a bag and labeled it. So remember, these are all pretty much the same length of bolts, and you have two nuts that go on those studs that we use to get this intake manifold on. And we cleaned this intake manifold out with some cleaner, and we used air tools to blow everything out. So that's gonna hopefully maybe even pick up a couple ponies if we're lucky. Let's not get too excited. Of course, like I say with everything, hand tighten first, then we'll torque everything down. Should be nice, no more leaks through these gaskets. It's always nice to have a oil leak-free car, isn't it? One of my favorite things. Okay, we've got the throttle body back on there with a new gasket. We've got the intake manifold on with new gaskets. And it's time to kind of put the intake back in here, the intake air filter, put the intake tract back together, and button this up. So we got a new air filter, we'll drop that in. The other one had quite a bit of sand and debris in it, so. Time to drain the oil out of the old Honda Accord 17 millimeter. Jesus. There we go. Whew. That's one sent home drain plug. Oil's pretty dark, so probably due for one. Again, if you don't get records with a car, just assume you're going to be doing this kind of basic stuff. While we're doing the oil change and have the wheels and tires off, accessibility of the oil filter is just that much easier. You can see it right through the wheel well here. So we're gonna go ahead and use our claw removal thing, and maybe it's got a technical name, but anyway, I use this oil filter removal claw. Works really good. So we're gonna just pull it off while we have access to it right there. Here's the claw. And here's our claw we use. By loosening or tightening, you can set it up, you can spin that. It grips into that oil filter and spins it right off. So let's go ahead and get this oil filter off. Time to put our new oil filter on. We'll be going with Honda OEM in this case. I'm a big fan of using their filters. So let's go ahead and slap this bad boy on. And there we go. Our OEM Honda oil filter in place. Ready to rock and roll on the Honda Accord V6 Coupe. Let's get some fresh oil in this Accord V6. So in the J Series 3 liter, it takes 5 quarts of 5W20 synthetic oil. So let's give it something to drink. The oil I'm going to be using today, folks, tried and true Mobil 1. Went with the high mileage. Not sure if it makes that big of a difference, but here we go. 5W20. We'll put all 5 quarts in her. Before you do this, don't forget to put your oil drain plug back in. It's an expensive mistake. Once you add your 5 quarts of oil, you still want to confirm that you're at the right level. So grab a clean shop towel. Perfect, right at the full line. Oil change complete.